Welcome, everyone, to this special episode of Manufacturing Talk Radio. We're speaking with Tim Fiore and Anthony Nieves from the Institute for Supply Management and their semi-annual forecast. It's out in May, comes out again in December. So we're going to be talking about comparisons between those two time periods. Lou, this is always an interesting show for us because it's a look forward what's going to happen for the balance of 2023.
And they always run pretty good in terms of their predictions, I might add.
Yeah, their numbers are pretty solid.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We have a solid panel. They know what they're doing. And although you have to be kind of like a soothsayer, you got to be a wizard or something with all the dynamics going on. Not too bad. This forecast actually fits very well with what's been happening with the monthly PMIs. It kind of ties it all together. So for your listeners, we do a forecast twice a year. We do one in December, pretty comprehensive, about 20 different elements. And we do an update of about 6 elements in May. And that kind of gets us in the right perspective. We do revenue growth, we do profit margins, business outlook, and so forth. So Anthony and I are here to talk about the update, which is very enlightening.
Excellent. And I know you have a slideshow for us also that'll make it more further informative. There we go. Business output and costs. So why don't we take it away?
Okay, you got it. All right. So we're going to swap each side. So I'll start with the manufacturing side. The first one that we update is revenue. And the right-hand side is where we are today. The left-hand side brings us back towards the post-pandemic. So in 2021, we said that we grew our revenue in 2021 by 14.1%. For 2022, in December of 21, we thought we'd grow another 6.5. By the time we got to May of 2022, we thought revenue would grow 9.2%. And then by the time we closed the year, we reported a 9.3% revenue growth for manufacturing for last year. And we predicted for this year, we see another 5.5% growth. Now with the update, we think that growth is only going to be 1.7. So a pretty dramatic fall off from where we've been in the last 3 years. This is the lowest predicted performance since the pandemic. Oh, I'm moving the sheets, right?
Do you have any insight into a brief reason as to why?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the huge uncertainty here around interest rates and a soft landing, a hard landing, 2% wage, 2% inflation year over year. How are they going to get there? Are we there now? It's kind of freezing everything. And you know, we in the manufacturing side, we really over ordered a lot. We ordered a lot of stuff beyond lead times because we were trying to get into queue to make sure we got what we needed. Well, we've been working off that over ordering now for a good 9 months. Our backlog has been declining for at least 6 months at a fairly heavy level, and the order books are really getting small. So prices you're going to see prices now are stabilizing. Lead times are starting to come down, but not where I would hope that they would be. But in the meantime, the uncertainty about the future and the issue that could do to liquidity is causing everything to kind of slow down.
Okay. Thanks for that explanation. Thank you.
So as we see on the services side, it's similar. We went from the 4.3% back in December down to last May was predicted to be minus 4.9. And you know, that was the shift from all that pent up demand we had coming out of the pandemic. And then going into 2023, we had the 2.1% that was reported in December. And then what was predicted going forward would be a 3.1, but down to a 2.7. And I mentioned previously on the show, as well as throughout this release, that we see the revenue shift more so into less tangible goods and more experiences as far as what consumers are buying. And keep in mind that the single largest contributor to GDP, not only in services, but overall, is the real estate rental and leasing industry, 14.45%, almost 14.5%. And with the interest rates where they are, we noticed that new housing starts were down. Then after that, it became even the resale was down, and even rents got softer, leasing got softer. That was very strong if you think back, because when rates first started going up and people weren't buying, they were renting. And then even that softened a bit even in the major metropolitan areas.
Yeah,
Next
thanks.
slide, please.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about employment. This is a prediction and a reported actuals. Now, the two terms here are predicted. That's where we do a forecast. The reported is when we do an estimate of the actual for the prior month. Two very important distinctions there. So one of the things we check up on is, what are your hiring plans? So in December 2021, for 2022, we predicted a 1% headcount growth. Now, remember, we had a lot of trouble attracting people back into the workplace. That was a really good estimation of what we thought we could do. By the time we got to May, we thought we could actually expand headcount last year by 3.2%. By the time we got to the end of last year, we only expanded headcount by 0.8%. And that was because of the excessive amount of quits that we hadn't experienced in many, many years. And then, I'm sorry, 2.8%. By the time May of last, we actually said that we had 8%. So we thought 3.2% employment growth. Last year, we got to actually 2.8%. And then for this year, we thought we'd grow another 3.9%. And now we're saying that it's going to be 0.5%. The difference between the left-hand and the right-hand side is really the function of the need. Before, we needed the people. We take as many as we can get. We pay whatever we had to pay. We train them and everything. Now that prediction for in May for the rest of the year at 0.5% is really a reflection of the uncertainty in the market. And we really don't need any more people. And a lot of what we've talked about with your listeners and watchers in the PMI reports is that we're trying to keep the headcount that we have. We work so hard to get them. We don't want to let them go and then have to rehire at some point in the moderate term future. So right now, we're really saying that, we're not going to grow headcount much this year. It's going to be 0.5 point compared to last year.
You look at services, and this has been ongoing mixed bag. I've stated this again on the show previously on the monthly, that depending on the industry within this sector, we know that certain industries, high profile layoffs in the tech world, information industry, and yet other businesses within the various other industries have had difficulty recruiting and hiring workers, backfilling open positions. And so that's why you've seen the employment grow very slowly. We saw the 0.1%, I'm sorry, 1 percentage point back in December 2021. What was predicted in May 2022 was a 2.5. I mean, all of this is in line with the low unemployment that we've seen. Reported was just a 0.2% increase, and that was since December. And then we have predicted back in December was a 1% increase, and now we're coming in at a 0.7%. So we're seeing very, very low increase of employment for the services sector. And right now, the uncertainty, the cautiousness that's out there is like many companies are holding firm. Again, some industries still are yearning for workers. We saw a shift from more tedious type work, whether it be in the accommodation and food services or retail sector, where there was better wages and better conditions and less tedious work, that we saw workers gravitate toward those other industries.
Okay, now we're turning to prices, which is everybody's favorite subject. So some real dynamics here. We predicted in December 21 for 2022 that we would grow 8.1% last year. By the time we got to May of last year, we thought last year we'd grow 11.1%. By the time we got to December of last year, we actually grew 11.4%. Now, this is on top of about a 14% growth in 2021. So, keep that in mind. That's a 25%, number, a huge amount. I've never seen anything like this before. So, and then we predicted for 2023 that by the end of 23, we would grow 2.2% additional, but that we also thought that we would see 2.5 points by this time this year. So essentially we said we're going to see another 2.5% growth in the first half of 2023, but by the time we get to the end of the year, we'll give 50 basis points of that back. We'll end up with a 2% growth compared to 2022. Now we're saying is, yeah, we actually saw a 2.3% growth in the first half of this year, but by the time we get to the end of the year, we're only going to see a 1% growth compared to December of 2022. So, i.e., the explanation of this is that you're actually going to see price contraction in the next 6 months, because we're going to come down pretty significantly here. We're going to come down, what, 60-something% growth compared to where we are today.
So with services prices, as we look at back on what was predicted, December 2021, the end of 21 to 22, see that huge jump, 9.2% increase. Same thing going forward, predicted May of 2022, 9.6. Then we went to 11%. This is all based on, as we see this trend, it's starting to trend down a little bit as far as the increases, 8.4% and then 4.3%. There has been some pushback with consumers not spending on certain items. They're more price conscious than they were during the pandemic. We had such limitations on availability and capacity that people were willing to pay more. Now they're being a little bit more cost conscious on things. And again, what I said earlier about the revenue, they're spending more. And this is, even though this is related to goods prices, we see the shift more toward experiences than buying tangible goods, buying all the consumer electronics and fitness equipment and everything that was all blowing out during the pandemic.
So the summary on both of these is that last December, we thought we'd see a softening of price growth, but now you look at both of these and we're seeing a significant softening. So if you're the somebody looking at that 2% growth year over year, we're kind of in a good alignment here. Manufacturing is going to grow 1% over a 12-month period. It's actually going to contract in the second half. And in the case of services here, we're going to actually grow only half of what we thought back in December. So that's all positive. And it's all being driven really by demand. You know, the uncertainty in demand that's driven by interest rate increases.
Tim brings up a good point about the pricing. Same thing on the services side, that at the second half of the year, we'll see prices decrease from where they are. Most of that, it's over 5% and nets out to 4.3, but the first part of the year, it's going to be larger increases.
Okay, yeah, same as what manufacturing is showing, right? Yeah.
Yep.
I'd like to just throw in one quick question. How does the interest rate put out by the Federal Reserve, if in fact they wind up freezing their growth trend and stabilizing, will that change or alter your predictions?
You mean if there's no more basis point increases?
Correct.
You know, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. You know, this whole thing about lagging, and it takes a long time when you increase interest rates, it takes a long time for it to catch up.
Right.
I'm not sure. I mean, if you ask me at the April PMI report, I would have said that we're not there. Now I'm looking at this and saying, you know, we're on a track here that could be good. So I don't know. I can't speak for them.
What do you think, Anthony?
You know, I concur with Tim. I think where we'll see the biggest impact, and again, it's going to lag because they're putting a freeze on increasing the rate, right? But as I mentioned earlier, real estate rental and leasing is the biggest contributor, right? And what's the cycle time? That won't be stimulated until there's a pullback in rates, okay, when rates go down. So just putting a freeze alone is not going to change the dynamics overall in any time soon. So I think it's, again, you know, especially with the uncertainty that's out there right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, capacity. So this is an expansion of capacity, your ability to produce goods. So it's equipment, it's people, it's everything. So let's go here to what we thought we were going to see in 2023. Last year, in 2022, we actually grew our capacity by 6.7%. We thought that we would expand our capacity an additional 5.3% this year. Now we're thinking it's going to be 0.4%, virtually no expansion. So this is a culmination of the 1 year worth of interest rate rises, and finally the elimination of all that backlog that we all built up. And now really what people are saying is, I don't really need much more capacity. I'm I'm kind of where I need to be.
See the same thing on the services side. I mean, there's not been, looking at where we're seeing what our respondents are predicting for May 2023, 2%, going back even to December of 2021 at 3.3%. 1.3 percentage difference, not all that big. And it was kind of just moving flat through there in the beginning, going into what was May of 2022. But overall, we're not going to see a significant change in production capacity on the services side.
Okay, the favorite one now, CapEx, direct result of optimism or no optimism in the market. So in 2021, manufacturing expanded its capital compared to 2020 by 12%. Now, 2020 wasn't a great year for capital expense. So, okay, that's not a big surprise. In 2022, we expanded another 12% too. So year over year, 25% growth compared to 2020, which probably gets us back to about where we were, which is good. Then, we thought in December for this year, we'd grow another 2.6. Now we're thinking 0.4. So essentially zero growth for this year. And that's a direct result of the uncertainty in the markets driven primarily by interest rates.
So on the services side, we can see the change going back to December of 2021, where it was a 10.3% increase predicted. Then the May to 6.2, we see it steadily going down, 6.0, 2.8, now to 4.0, which is better than where I thought it would come in, quite frankly. Typically, services companies will refurbish, reinvest, renovate when things are a little bit, when there's a lull in activity. And that's why you saw that 10.3% way back in December of what was predicted, because we were still in the throes of the pandemic and companies were looking to revitalize their product service offering and, physical plant, whatever it might be, restaurant, hotel, retail, whatever. Now it's even at 4.0, again, more optimistic than I thought it would be. Typically, we see this coming in somewhere around that, even in normal times.
Okay, operating rate. And this is the last slide. I think we're getting close to the end. The point here is that during the post-pandemic recovery, when the pandemic hit in May of that year, we were only running at 76%. We ran high 80s since then. And now we believe we're running at 82%. So we're stepping it back. Lack of capital investment, production capacity now virtually flat. We're trying to retain people because we don't want to have to rehire them in the short term. Things don't improve here in the sentiment for the future, then the layoffs will begin in significance, and you'll see this number drop to probably into the 70s range. Remember, the 76 back in May was after we laid off 20 million people.
So conversely, on the services side, you see very high operating rate, 89.4 May and December, bounced up to 91, uptick to 91%, back down to 89.9, and then up to 91. And, in the past, when we've looked at this, anything 85 and above, you're really operating at a very high rate.
Yeah.
And this is just indicating that I think it's just because of the lack of labor resources that they've had applied to certain operations and whatnot, that their operating rate is as high, doing more with less. And that seemed to have been the trend ongoing for quite some time on the services side.
Okay, I think that's the last slide.
So, Tim, I want to just go back to manufacturing capital capacity utilization. At 82%, you're right in the sweet spot, are you not? Is that 75 to 85 where they want to be?
Well, I think it's probably in the low end of the sweet side. And the reason I'm saying that is that as we've gone through earnings seasons here, we haven't disappointed a lot. There haven't been major misses. And so we're running at 82%. It means, okay, we're still making money. And that's kind of the key. So I think we're at the low end of the sweet spot. We know that at 75%, it was very painful, very painful. And, to Tony's point, I'd like to see high 80s. That I feel pretty good at. But at 82, it fits with the whole thing that I'm trying to hold on to the people because I don't want to pay severance. I don't want to have to go to try to rehire them, 4 or 5 months from now. But that, that whole argument was really solid when we thought half two was going to be really bumpy, half one, and half two would be better. That whole better and half two is not as firm anymore. And in our calls that we've been having monthly, I've actually been pushing it out now to Q4, where I think the better is more going to be Q4. And I do believe that. So if companies can get through the earnings season and disclose reduced earnings for 2023 and not get hammered too bad, then, we'll continue with the headcounts that we have, I think.
So you also asked some special questions of your respondents. Is there anyone in particular that was a key indicator or a surprise?
I don't think so. It was really all about hiring. And everybody across the board said it was easier to hire. And that's consistent with the comments that we're getting from the PMI. We asked them about supply chain difficulties, and across the board, things are a lot better now than what they were. And that's consistent with what we're getting. Supply chain is not a constraint. In fact, they have additional capacity. So, and there's a bit of a squeeze going on here. You guys know this because, the commodity markets are still fairly firm. The steel markets, the copper markets, aluminum to some extent. In April, we reported plastics were expensive. So you got prices still at a high level that aren't really facilitating the release of new orders at the right lead time. So lead times are still kind of opaque. It's not really clear that they're coming down where they should be at, at a proper trough. And prices are still high. We're not showing a 4% decrease. I mean, we're still saying at the end of the year, you're going to see 1% growth from last year. That doesn't signal to me to be weakness, which is what all the confusion is about. I mean, if you go back, I compared a whole bunch of our stuff to the Great Recession in 2009, and we went negative. We went negative on revenue, went negative on prices, went negative on employment. We're not doing any of that here, which if you put it in this perspective, that really puts a lot of light on things.
So, Lou?
One point that you mentioned about metals, which is near and dear to my heart. The aluminum market is tight as hen's teeth. Domestic delivery on aluminum is out almost a year, and the prices are fairly high. Nickel also is very high in terms of pricing, and also deliveries are really stretched out. International nickel is probably making more money than they've ever made. So, those are two large markets, the aluminum and nickel market. And, the deliveries are really stretched out, which would have an ultimate effect on revenue growth being pushed out.
Yeah, so I mean, that doesn't fit with a slowing economy, right?
Right, that's right.
Which is part of the quandary here, that whole stagflation question.
There's certain intangibles that we sometimes don't consider. And think back to the last recession, started in December of 2007. Remember, after the first quarter, what was foot traffic like out in malls? What was the road traffic like? We had high unemployment. Even driving in Southern California, the roads, you can see the lightness of traffic on the roads, right? During the pandemic, I could get to my office in 20 minutes, right? 15 minutes, and you could drive 80, 90 miles an hour, and there wasn't even anyone to stop you, right? Now, it's bumper to bumper. There's all this flow of traffic everywhere, trucks on the road. It does not seem like we're in any kind of economic slowdown just based on vehicular traffic and everything else.
Yeah, good point. I just drove back from Dallas to Connecticut, and there were so many trucks on the road. I said, gosh, this is a good sign.
No doubt. And gentlemen, we want to thank you for sharing this report with us. We've done this every year now for about a decade, and this is really incredible information. We encourage you to check us out at mfgtalkradio.com. You'll hear this episode. Get some information on the report. Tim, Anthony, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
you,
Take care,
gentlemen.
guys.
Thank you.
See you in June.
We'll see you next 2 weeks.
And for our listeners and observers, Keep in mind that you can find us on all of the podcast applications. We are also on YouTube and Rumble for video. And as always, thanks for joining us on this episode of Manufacturing Talk Radio.